Hey, welcome back to the Backyard Professor Chess videos. Here's another game of Paul Morphy playing the Ruy Lopez as black. We've seen the last video as white. Let's see how he handles the Ruy Lopez as black. Here he's playing Adolf Anderssen, his famous rival that was just every bit as good as him, except for the fact that the idea... The idea is Anderssen did not have the grasp of positional chess as strongly as Morphy did. And they say this game really shows that. So it will be interesting to see what about Morphy did Anderssen in this, because they were rivals and they were both a terror on the chessboard to their opponents. So this is going to be a great battle. Now watch what Paul does. Morphy pulls his bishop out right now. Very interesting. Really interesting. And the c3 that's a standard bump, more or less. And he says, okay, it's time to hit the bishop one more time. And this time Anderssen, instead of going to here, he came all the way back. That's kind of a different, and then hitting that center with the d5 push. Absolutely. Every time. And of course, Anderssen takes Morphy's pawn, and Morphy returns fire with the knight. Now we're getting an interesting mix with the battle of the center. Anderssen pushes h3. Probably not necessary yet, but he did it anyway. Morphy went ahead and castled. And then Anderssen castled. So we've got the castling out of the way, and then Morphy does the same thing. I don't think they want their knights down into here. But it wasn't that necessary of a move, but they did it anyway. Now, Anderssen pushes the d4 pawn. So Morphy will take it with the e-pawn. And Anderssen will take it with the c-pawn. So Anderssen has the isolated pawn now, hitting his bishop. So Anderssen's c-pawn takes the d4, hitting Morphy's bishop. And Morphy brings his bishop down to b6. Not d6, b6. He wants to keep that diagonal there. And so Anderssen brings his knight out, and now the knight to d goes to b4. So he's building up on the queen side, it looks like, doesn't it? Very interesting. He's hitting this bishop. Anderssen wants to keep that bishop pair, no question about it. That's a beautiful bishop. That's a beautiful bishop, right toward the king. A swath right through the center. So he's wise not to swap out. The middle is not going to have a lot of pawns. So it's going to be a good bishop board. He said, nope, I'm not going to exchange. And now bishop comes up to e6. Anderssen will ask him to make up his mind about his knight. Now that you're not going to take my bishop, I'm not going to leave you right there. And he bumps it right back to the center. Absolutely. Anderssen continues developing. And knight d to f6. You can see that they both, yeah, they're manipulating some things around, but they're both fairly smooth, even, all the way across the board with their power and influence, huh? It's not lumped up on one side or the other. Knight d to f6, I got that queen to d2. He brings up another piece. Rook to e8, taking the file, absolutely. Yes, and rook to d1, he will take the partial file. Notice, this supports that isolated pawn, doesn't it? You've got the queen, you've got the rook, you've got the knight, you've got the bishop. Anderssen's doing a great job making sure that knight's protected. Morphy doesn't have as many shots against it just yet, but it's under pressure. Yeah? This is interesting to see how they're developing this. And then bishop to d5, blockading the pawn, and we'll see if he lets him keep it there. Knight f to e5. He's bringing in his knight. Beautiful outpost. It's not a permanent outpost because it can be exchanged. But that's a very good central, fabulous move. And now Morphy bumps up another piece into the center. You can see these guys are just giving it everything they've got. That's what made them such exciting rivals. Really interesting. The center is just clogged with pieces. It'll be fun to see how they do this. Queen, look at the battering ram, the bishop and the queen down to here. That could be deadly. Yeah, you've still got the knight here though, so it's not yet, but there's a potential for a kingside attack. Knight takes the d4 right there. Eliminates the pawn right now. He doesn't wait until he has all his pieces against it. He says, I don't like that pawn. I'm willing to swap the knight. Bishop takes the d4. Let's see how this affects things. And then the bishop takes the d4. Nice fork on the knights. The knight is hanging now. And knight takes d5. Knight takes this bishop here. So it's a terrific exchange. Queen takes e5. Putting the queen on the same open file with the rook to either have a 7th rank, challenge the queen, or an 8th rank, although he does have an escape square. But the bishop's up in here. He can bump down. So this is getting iffy, right? Watch what Anderssen does. Nice fork. True, he's not going to get the fork. He is exchanging one of the guardians of the king because he's got this battery with the bishop behind a queen ready to come down in here. That could be interesting if he can get away with that. Queen will take. So that kind of opens up Paul Morphy a little bit. Sure enough, queen h7. Check. At this point, it's true, he just simply pushes to the side at this point, and it's not that big a deal, but now he's bringing his bishop up, hitting the rook, centralizing his bishop, keeping his queen in line. Not staying up very well. Very nice. Rook A to d8. Grab that other open file, support your own bishop. In fact, there could be a vicious discovery attack here if he's not careful. Boy, the bishop taking the pawn and having the rook and the rook hit, that could get interesting. We shall see what happens. Well, the king goes to h1, and bishop takes the b2. Yeah, he's going to threaten. He's got a discovered attack on that rook, and he's going to threaten that rook there. So both rooks are under fire here from Morphy. Rook A to b1, simple enough, right? Yeah. Rook takes d1. So an exchange of rooks, that makes sense. Because now queen can take f2. And he's got the 7th rank with his queen. He's still got a rook on an open file. So here we go. It's interesting that Anderssen looked like he had the attack with that fabulous bishop pair up here. And now it's Morphy who has the attack. This is so typical of these guys. They were both just attackers. And he does hit queen h8, check. And Morphy just bumps basically up, which is not a crisis for him. And so, of course, Anderssen has to come back up. You don't want to lose your queen. right? Morphy brings his bishop back under the central dominance, knocking out the escape square. Yes, his rook file is covered up at this point, but the queen is up here, so we shall see. And he does make sure things are peachy. He's re-solidifying his... you notice Morphy has way more pawns. This endgame could be really brutal on Anderssen if it goes to an endgame, if Anderssen will last that long. And now Morphy's coming up with his own attack, which is almost a split mirror image of what he was just getting from Anderssen. Yeah, they were a pair, weren't they? So, Anderssen brings his king back up, and queen... Did you see that one coming? I didn't either when I played that. He wants to exchange the queens. That makes sense, though, because they're approaching an endgame, and he has majority pawns on both sides. Yeah, and each one of them have a bishop, which works really well in this kind of an endgame situation with pawns on both sides of the board. So it makes sense. He wants to change off the queens. And it works. I mean, there's nothing else Anderssen can do. Literally forced. So, yeah, he's got the majority, but he's got double pawns on this side. That side will be the one to push. I'm thinking, I mean, if it really gets way down to an end game. So let's see how this works. Anderssen starts finding targets, and so does Morphy. And Anderssen takes a pawn, and Morphy keeps his pawns controlled. So here come the kings, which is proper. Bishop to d6. He wants to keep things tight and grouped and connected. It's the end game, and he is playing Anderssen. Rook to d3. He's going to try to take center. King d7. There's no reason to leave your king out there in the open. King to e2. Rook to a8. Target. Nice, because now he gets either the bishop or the pawn. Right? No, not yet. Oh yes, rook took a3. Yep, he got the pawn. And bishop, he's got his bishop covered, so bishop comes to c8 check. And what Anderssen is trying to say is, hey, if you take my bishop, I'll take your bishop, and we can call it a draw. At least that's my speculation. It's unlikely with the two passed pawns here that Morphy would agree to a draw. But Anderssen is really trying to throw some tactics here. I mean, you got to give it your best shot. Morphy doesn't fall for it. He says, I want to keep my bishop, man. So he goes back to the drawing board, and he said, all right, let's see what else we can do. Morphy, in the meantime, goes on the offensive. Check. King to f3. He's going to remain by his pawns properly. So bishop to c5. Keep an eye on things. Bishop to e6. If you're not going to take my bishop, I'm going to come back out. Rook to f2. Check. Trying to get the king away from the pawns. King to g3. He's not going to have any of it. He's going to stay right there. Rook to f6. Target. Rook to d7. Check. Getting hairy, isn't it? That's pretty interesting. King to bishop 6. Keeping it compact in the little groups. Yeah. Bishop to g4. Bishop to D6 check. King goes to H4, trying to dodge behind cover as much as possible. Morphy begins his march with the pawns. Bishop comes to F3. And here goes Morphy advancing his pawns. Rook decides, let's get rid of one of these pawns. So the majority isn't on this side anymore. However, the pawns are fairly even. It's going to be tough. Morphy's winning, no question. Now Anderssen has to think hard, fast. However, yes, he eliminated a pawn, but now Rook F4 check. Yeah. So the bishop blocks the check. You got a passed pawn. There's your power play. Yeah, keep pushing those pawns. This is good endgame strategy to see, man. If you have pawns on both sides, push those passed pawns, no question. G3, hit the rook. And now Morphy says, okay, I will go check. And he resigns. At this point, Anderssen said, that's enough, because Morphy's going to get one of those pawns in. So that was a great game. So we see how at least one illustration on each side of the board with white and with black that Morphy handled the Ruy Lopez. I have a couple more games on the Ruy Lopez from other grandmasters that I want to show you and give you their idea on the strategies with it. So, be good, do well, have fun. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. And yes, my ear is itching like crazy. One of you viewers told me to get my finger out of my ear, and I can't blame you. However, it itches because my hair's too long, so have a drink. See you soon.